Hello, everyone. SandDAO podcast number 55. Today is January 9th. So it's our first one in the new year, 2025. A lot has happened. Lots been happening over the past month for the DAO. And today we're going to be talking about SIP number 18, which is the SandDAO podcast SIP. So the one you're listening to right now. We propose the funding of 15 more episodes. And as you can see from the thumbnail, spoiler alert, it did not go as expected. So today isn't a read through of SIP number 18. It's an after action report, a hot wash, a debrief to just walk through what happened and a little bit of commentary thrown in. I do not represent the Sandbox Game or the Sandbox Foundation. I'm not your legal or financial advisor, and nothing I say is to be taken as legal or financial advice. When I say the word SIP, I mean Sandbox Improvement Proposal. When I say the word DAO, I mean decentralized autonomous organization. When I refer to SandFam, I'm referring to the Sandbox community, those who participate in the people, product, and purpose of the ecosystem. That ecosystem, according to me, looks a little bit like this. We've got the people, everyone from a gamer to the Sandbox team, the product, everything from the game client to the DAO, and the purpose, which is a white paper and all the things that the senior leadership of Sandbox has said to clarify why the Sandbox exists. All that together equals the ecosystem. It spins round and round every single day. All of us trying to just figure it out and do what we can. This episode centers around both the participants, also, I should say, the DAO delegates, and the actual DAO itself. Scoreboard is. Oh, I did update this slide. So we do have 0 SIPs for voting, 10 SIPs approved, 9 SIPs not approved, which is now SIP number 18, I should say. SandDAO podcast did not pass, so it is now 10 SIPs approved, 9 SIPs not approved. And a number of SIPs on draft that are going to go to vote, one of which is the establishing of the community council, which was written by the Sandbox DAO admin team and also co-authored by myself. The team selection for the UGC platform is still awaiting to go to vote, so unsure when that'll be. And for the DAO checkbook, because the SIP-18 did not pass, the checkbook remains unaffected at 2.3 million sand of our 15 sand million budget having been spent, 15%. We're at 211,000 token holders, 2,200 voters, almost 10,000 votes. I'm Lanzer, your SandDAO podcast host. I'm also president of the MetaWorlds group, which we have published 2 experiences. One was a Game Maker Fund 2023 called Lava Defense, and one was a Builders Challenge 1 called Floor Droppers, which was just featured in Alpha Season 4. Today we'll be talking about SIP number 18, which is funding 15 more episodes for the SandDAO podcast. The SandDAO podcast is what you're listening to right now. It is an educational and news show, all specifically about the Sandbox DAO, all the things that happened, all the new updates, interviewing authors, and all sorts of things. We're at 55 episodes in about five months. So we're going to go through from beginning to end what happened, and then we'll end with surfing through the forums discussions to see what the comments were, and then we will go through what happens next for SandDAO podcast. So here's the first thing: was I made an announcement video of requesting vote from the community. So we'll go through that first. Then we'll read through the proposal details, talk about the council's negative recommendation. Then we will go through the voting results and how some early no's kind of set the stage. There's mixed delegate voting. And then the nail in the coffin was the WhaleVault 7.6 million no vote, which tipped the scale from a majority yes to a no. And then a spoiler, that was my fault entirely. Didn't expect it to happen that way, but it did. And then the forum discussion, which was one of, if not the most responded to discussion thread in the in the Sandbox style forums. It generated so much discussion, debate. I think we really figured out a lot of what we were looking for out of a SIP out of that, and how we wanted to spend our resources. So let's look at the announcement video first. And here's what I made up about a month ago, right before the SIP went to vote. Hey, SandFam, my name is Lanzer. I want to talk to you about SIP-19, an educational and news podcast all about the Sandbox DAO. I started the SandDAO podcast as a way to discuss the launch of the DAO with the community. Our episodes range from interviews with special counsel and advisory board members to official delegates. Topics cover land ownership and voting, and we've covered almost every SIP plus an interview with the SIP author if they were available. We also go over other community reactions with community members. We just celebrated our 50th episode, covering how the DAO admin team has been delivering on transparency goals to the community. We've published 50 episodes in only 5.5 months, which is about one episode every 3 days. Our 34 guests have answered over 400 questions, and reception from SandFam has been very humbling. The audience has watched over 1,000 hours of content, with thousands of the social media engagements and hundreds of podcast episode downloads. By far, the most impressive stat we've reached is up to 27 live viewers when live streaming our episodes. These are really good numbers for a Twitch live stream, as most channels don't average above 5 viewers. I want to pause right there, and that is actually one of my low-key most the results that I was most excited about. It's really, really hard to get above 5 viewers. Right now, this episode alone has 2, the one you're listening to right now. And we were able to get over 20 3 times, and over 10, I don't know, probably half a dozen more. Hey, Roxy. Hola, amigo, mi gente. And so we were able to get almost 30. That was the Magic Palette episode with Pepe when we did I think the demo. And also the interview with Mia Bao, who's an advisory board member. And then our interview with Bruno, also known as Pickaxe Master, who is a very well-known developer and also host of SandFam Cafe. So those were really cool. And Sandbox has always been kind of a Twitch-heavy community, in addition to Discord. Yeah, so we're going to keep going with the video. We're requesting funds to scale SandDAO podcast for a larger audience, which means more guests, deeper analysis, more platforms, basically to do it bigger and better. I myself am no stranger to podcasts, having run 5 shows since 2016, which is over 100 episodes. I myself have been SandFam since 2021. I'm a gamer, landowner, studio publisher of minigame experiences like Floor Droppers, which is currently in Alpha Season 4. And I'm a part of many different Web3 families. I center my podcast around the Sandbox DAO, touching frequently on the Sandbox ecosystem. That Sandbox ecosystem, episode 31, is my favorite one of all time. I love that one the most. This is coincidentally one of my top viewed episodes, alongside my interview with Seb, my first episode with Andy Ritchie and Hoddle Hill, and an episode looking into how the DAO came to be, called The Birth of the Sandbox DAO. My top 5 is an interview with Touche after he took a step from the Sandbox back in October. I normally don't look at views for the show. And for the podcast, the SIP itself, I did end up having to look at the views to run account for the numbers. I didn't actually realize that episode 31, Intro to the Sandbox Ecosystem, was my highest viewed by far. It was even higher than my interview with Seb in episode 8. I was surprised as anyone because the ecosystem was, even though it was the most fun, it was, it kind of can be maybe not something everyone wants to pay attention to, but apparently they do. And then my third one was my second highest viewed episode was Sebastian Bourget, the co-founder and COO of Sandbox. My third highest was the community reaction part 1, so very first episode with Andy Ritchie and Hoddle Hill, just trying to figure out what the heck the DAO was, May 28th when it started. Then my fourth episode, surprising me out of everyone, really, was episode 34, which was the birth of the Sandbox DAO. It was a very long one, but it pretty much kind of showed the relationships and how the DAO came to be in terms of timeline, like which faces did what to bring the DAO online, and culminated in the relationship map, which looks a little bit like this one right here. So I started out there, and it was kind of the unveiling of that. But that was a critical one, somewhat critical one of the DAO, because I had to do all that work myself, and at the time I wasn't getting much information from the DAO admin team, so I had to do it myself. So that was the height of my criticism, I'd say, against the DAO before Kunta came online and started really repairing relationships and opening the DAO up. And then episode 30, one of my newer ones, was with Touche, who, when he announced that he was withdrawing, just taking a step back, was able to secure an exit interview with them, let's call it. And I hope one day he returns. All right, let's go back to the video. Is an interview with Touche after he took a step from the Sandbox back in October. We've come a long way since episode 1, and I would appreciate your yes vote on SIP number 19, funding an educational news podcast about the Sandbox DAO. Thanks, SandFam. Actually, it was SIP-18. The reason why it says SIP-19, just like my other one said SIP-17, it should have said 16, is because when the actual SIP went online at first, they had told me it was SIP-19. And then because one of SIP-18, whatever it was supposed to be, didn't go through, they end up bumping it to SIP-18. So by this time, I'd already made the video and voting had started happening. Anyways, so that is the little short 2-minute video I put out to everyone to say, hey, please vote. Please vote. And they did. So let's go to the proposal details. We're just going to go this one pretty fast because it's all after the fact now. Okay, so you can see the results right here at the top. No, after 14 days, the no carried the yes vote at 57%. The no carried the final vote at 57%, 22.6 million no. The yes vote came in at 42%, 16.9 million. Only 0.18% abstained, or 71,000. Voting started December 24th. It ended January 8th. All right, so the SIP-18 was to finance 15 episodes of the SandDAO podcast. You'll notice right away the council recommendation is negative. Now, I am not the first one to receive a negative. I think about 5 other SIPs have received a negative. The description read, the council does not support funding this proposal due to concerns about cost efficiency and performance relative to existing initiatives. The SandDAO podcast budget request of $1,000 per episode is significantly higher than the production costs of the Sandbox DAO's Digging in the Sand DITS podcast, which is produced for less than $400 per episode. Additionally, performance data shows that 48 of the 50 SandDAO podcast episodes have achieved fewer views than the last 3 episodes of DITS, which garner an average of 106 views per episode on YouTube, total of 317. While the SandDAO podcast has made notable contributions to the community, this proposal lacks evidence of scalability or a clear plan to deliver superior results compared to existing DAO supportive initiatives. I'm going to skip ahead a little bit because I knew that there was going to get a negative. During SIP curation, the old process before they went to the new one, you knew what you were going to get. So they had told me that I was going to get a negative recommendation, and they asked me if I wanted to continue with the process knowing that. One SIP author, once upon a time, said no. That's why there's one withdrawn on the scoreboard. I said yes. I was confident that the community saw the value in SandDAO podcast. So I wrote up a short little blurb in the problem description to address that directly. And here's what I wrote back in response. DITS has the advantage, Digging in the Sand podcast, which is the official Sandbox DAO podcast, has the advantage of Sandbox branding. SandDAO has received little to no reposting from the Sandbox account and was forced to build everything from scratch. The highest Sandbox DAO video has 215 views. SandDAO's highest is only 25 views less than that. SandDAO streams episodes live to Twitch and has exceeded 20 plus live viewers about 4 times and about 10 plus live viewers 15 times. Scalability will be achieved by expanding the team to reach audiences not yet accessed. $1,000 per episode supports editors living, excuse me, the 1,000 per episode supports editors earning a livable wage, interpreters for our international guests, such as Sebga, French, who spoke French. I need an interpreter for him, episode number 38, or Meta Futura, which was an Italian guest I need an interpreter for, and that was episode 24, and other expenses necessary to operate a business. That was my response to them. Something I didn't, and I wasn't trying to pick a fight, but something that I did know was that the $400 per episode is likely well below what is actually being paid because there's full-time staff on Digging in the Sand podcast, and 400 per episode seems far too low. And also, they're counting every episode on the Digging in the Sand podcast to include the non-podcast episodes, and that's how they get this average of 106 views per episode. If you don't count them, it's much closer to like 50. So yeah, it's unfortunate that they worded it like this because the numbers are off to a degree that I would consider significant, and it set the stage for what happened next. All right, so we're gonna keep going. I had the little I started with the thumbnail of Seb, episode 8, and here's the what. This proposal seeks funding for the production of 15 episodes of the SandDAO podcast. These episodes aim to expand the reach and quality of the podcast by improving audio-visual production and diversifying the content with a new social media format. The project plans to scale the podcast distribution to 8 new platforms, including TikTok, YouTube Shorts, Pandora, to broaden its audience and increase engagement across multiple channels. Why? The SandDAO podcast has successfully contributed to the Sandbox ecosystem by offering in-depth discussions with SIP authors, DAO delegates, the Sandbox team members. To further strengthen the Sandbox DAO community, there is a need for increased professional production quality and wider distribution to address gaps in engagement and participation. By improving the podcast format and expanding its presence, it aims to address current challenges like low DAO voting participation and SandFam sentiment toward the DAO, which at the time was dismal. I wrote this SIP 5 or 6 months ago, back in about July timeframe, and it was rough. It was really rough. And you can look at episode 31 and 34. I go over that quite a bit in Birth of Sandbox DAO. I already talked about that earlier this episode, where the height of my criticism was not a lot of transparency. And go look also at Sandbox DAO's official podcast. It's episode 1, where they screen share all 300, 200 survey results, and it's just we don't feel like we're being heard. There's not enough transparency. It was rushed, and then Cyril and Kunta go through the they address those questions and results and really provide the transparency that we're looking for. So really good on them. Okay, and then I'll just kind of skim through the rest of this. So how are we going to do it? We're going to hire additional team members, including an assistant, a shorts creator, to reach audiences that I haven't been reaching and create some of that bite-sized content. I already did have someone start creating that, just kind of leaning forward. And so it's going to come out of my pocket now because we didn't ultimately get funded. But I do have a couple TikToks, Reels, and YouTube Shorts that are going to come out of this regardless, and kind of reach a larger audience. That way, it it balances my long form content with short term content. Okay, and I'm the one that runs the podcast. As I already introduced myself, we're a trusted partner and of Sandbox. We've been involved since 2021, and I already mentioned floor droppers. There's the rest of the team. Here was a little thumbnail put together. What I would do with the funding. I was going to bring on more guests, do some deeper analyses into all sorts of things like the Constitution, and then here are all the extra platforms. Which, as I responded to one message in the forums, comes with the RSS.com package. It's manual, so I didn't have the time to do it all by myself. Hence, the podcast assistant that we were going to pay for to go through all the peculiarities of Pandora and YouTube Shorts and Deezer and iHeartRadio and all the different stuff they needed. This one I already showed earlier is the high amount of viewers that we got. Who read that? Roxy, what were you referring to? Who read what? And then the SIP details it's really expounded on the TLDR. It just addresses need for better communication. We've contributed valuable content so far, everything from interviews to analyses. We covered all the news events, like when the SIP process changed. We went over, here's the changes, and then we went through a dry run, a rehearsal of the actual application itself. I've interviewed advisory board members, special counsel, and community members. We've covered the whole gamut of the DAO, and we did it. We paid for it ourselves, so we weren't. It was free to everyone else, and we ended up producing 50 or 54 episodes in 5 months. All right, we just went over this one. And DITS, the Digging in the Sand podcast, has been around for about a month now, whereas SandDAO has been around for somewhere closer to 6 months. Okay, and then proposed solution was to do 50 more episodes, but increase the quality, increase the team to do a better job. Here's some stats, and it's the same thumbnail that I referenced in the beginning video, published at 39 episodes in 5 months. It ended up being something closer to 50 by the time I actually get to today. This was written a while ago, so I had to continually update it until it got to vote. And available on many different platforms, 16 guests answering 180 questions. I think I'm up to something like 30 guests now, and something closer to 300 or 400 questions. A lot of hundreds of hours of watched content, thousands of likes, retweets, episode downloaded a few hundred times. And I've been doing this since 2016. There's some milestones that were proposed and agreed upon from the team, myself and the DAO admin team, and some stipulations. Budget breakdown. Here's the team, the material costs, and all that. I wasn't asking for any money to produce, to reimburse on like stuff I already bought, like this microphone right here and this nice little set behind me. I wasn't asking for anything like that. That was all future things like premium accounts for XYZ that got me a lot more usability and functionality, things that I felt I needed to really do a good job. In previous episodes, we've covered everyone from special counsel, advisory board, delegates, landowners and voting, news and landowner interviews, SIP authors and SIP demos even, and community reactions. Risk analysis, I mean, it was very, 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 very low, low threat risk analysis. Here's an example of the demo we did with Pepe for SandDAO 15. It was a 3-part episode where we showcased what Magic Palette did. It's really cool. I love it. Really looking forward to it. And with 50 episodes already published, we provide in-depth insight into many, many different things. And the only Achilles heel of this show is that it's very long form. So I tend to present everything I have. And so the episodes that I was going to fund were really going to cut down on that to something that I didn't have the time to do myself, which was the editing. It already takes 5 hours to prepare, and there's only so much I'm willing to spend per day to produce free content. So this was to bring on the team needed to really make it digestible. Cut down a 40-minute episode down to two or three 1 or 2 minute videos. That's something I did for episode 30, and I'll post that now because it's already paid for. It just yep. I was preparing the team to do that. And then all sorts of stuff about potential and brand identity and connections, and here's the team. And there's the end of it. So that was all in all, pretty straightforward podcast. Everyone already kind of knows what it is that I do, and I wanted funding for 15 more episodes at 1,000 an episode for about 15,000. And my secret plan was to stretch that out to something like 20 or 25 episodes. I was already talking with the vendors and the freelancers that I was working with to have more bulk discount deals, but I hadn't secured that by the time this went to vote. I only had their public rates that you get off Fiverr and Upwork, so I hadn't quite. I didn't want to promise something I couldn't deliver on, so I left it at 1,000 per episode. That doesn't matter now, but that's what was going to happen. Okay, so let's go into the results. So here's the voting mixture. Right off the bat, you see. Oops, that needs to. There we go. Right off the bat, you see the big one, WhaleVault.eth, 7.6 million voting power, and we'll get into that one last because that right there is the story. The rest of the delegates all voted their conscience, all voted yes, no, based on many different variables. They each gave really insightful feedback. Like that was the winning thing out of all this was just how involved the delegates were, and I felt like they gave me their fair consideration. And each one had a different reason for voting yes or no. They kind of split down the middle, voting yes or no, almost half yes, half no. And each one said something different. Uh, we'll get into the forum here a little bit later, but we'll just click through these real fast. Hit pause if you are interested in reading the full message. You can see that some of them are citing yes or no based on talking to different community members. Some of them are citing yes and no based on the cost. Some of them say it's too expensive. Some of them say it's a deal, it's a bargain, and some of them say that well, I don't support because the council doesn't support. Each one had a different reason, and that was really cool to see. It felt like each person really did give this fair consideration. Some of them mentioned, like you just read there, that it wouldn't be fair to other streamers just singling out SandDAO Podcast. Roxy's in the chat right now. This one's Roxy's. And go look at SandDAO Podcast 54 from a few days ago. We finally got to interview Roxy Miguel as a delegate, and we briefly went over that. And then our last delegate. So they had a wide range of opinions, very wide, and that was cool. That told me the system was working as intended. So I didn't fault anyone at all for their yes no vote at that point. Just it was up to me to make the case. So it was pretty much split down the middle. However, what was not split down the middle was WhaleVault.eth. Now, WhaleVault, I talked about them before on the SandDAO podcast. At the end of every episode, we have the spaces, and the spaces talk about the different places that SandFam gathers. Well, where does SandFam gather? One of them is Natively Digital, right there. Whale members. So they've been around for quite some time. And let's go to the map. And they are a major investor in the sandbox. They own about 1,600 lands, which is 7 million voting power. So you can find them down there in the bottom right, next to Atari, all that. They're pretty big. So we're gonna get into that little story right now because that story is a lesson. And I'll let you decide whether it's a good or bad lesson. It has both. Okay, so let's we're gonna get into this, but you know what? I realized I already talked about it in the forums, so we're gonna find that post, and then there it is, big update. All right, so here's how this went down. The reason why SandDAO Podcast SIP failed was because of the 7.6 million votes that went to no by the by WhaleDAO, which was the body behind Whale Vault, but it's actually controlled by the Whale Council. We'll get into that. So the big thing to know here is that they have 7.6 million voting power, and if you subtract 22.6 minus 7.6, you get 15. So the yes 16.9. Can't see what I'm right here. The yes, the 16.9 would have won had it not been for the 7.6 million vote no by WhaleVault. But let's get into reason why, because the reason why is far more important than than what actually just the math of it. I am completely to blame here. And the reason why I'm completely to blame is because back in Magic Palette, so SIP number 6, this one right here, was Pepe. It was almost universally accepted. Everyone supported it, that sort of thing. One of the back then, quorum was really hard to maintain. See that right there, 103%? He barely got it. And we were almost every 50% of the SIPs were getting rejected because we didn't have quorum. So one of the big voters, we were all trying to find out who can we ask to get votes. One of the big voters was WhaleVault. No one really knew much about him, that sort of thing. So Pepe reached out to WhaleVault. And I interviewed him a number of times. He's, I think, my most interviewed SIP author at this point. But WhaleVault ultimately said no to Pepe because they were concerned about wallet security. Then they're connecting their 1,500 lands to Snapshot and then something bad happening. All right, so he gets a no. I join Well members to support him because we all want Magic Palette to pass. But I quickly learned that they're not going to come off that rationale. It makes sense. So I wasn't going to try and convince them after that. And at the same time, I interviewed Arthmort, who for SIP number 8 was trying to become the curator for the Sandbox DAO's future artwork collection. Okay.
Sorry, I'm using a bunch of
It's
words here
okay.
and
It's
there.
okay. I know very little about the Arth world, so I'm learning here. So provenance is a word, and it talks about lineage, like aura and ancestry, and that's what gives it value is its history and its connection to lineage.
Yes,
Okay.
exactly. And sometimes a more broader example is when celebrities own some artwork.
So that I know nothing. I knew nothing about art, and that really piqued my interest. And it just so happened to coincide with me going to Whale members, who is very artwork centric. Like Whale members, first and foremost, are a bunch of art enthusiasts. So I stayed because they were. I wanted to learn more about art. I wanted to figure out like what was this all about. Ordinals and what was the value of cool artwork on the blockchain, that sort of stuff. It didn't change until a month or two later, at the end of September, when the Whale Council, who is the people in leadership of whale members, announced the start of their DAO, and that would be this one here, the Whale DAO, which is an omniversal members club that unites, excites, and engages its members on the long-term digital renaissance of art and culture. Okay, cool. That's awesome. So they announced their DAO that same day. I am so excited when I see that. I become the most excitable eager beaver of all time, and I write a sip up, a sip. I write a whale improvement proposal. They call it Wavy. I wrote up its first proposal that same day. I submitted it, and the proposal basically said to establish a structured approach for WhaleVault.eth to vote in the Sandbox DAO. At the time, we were still struggling with quorum, so I really, really wanted to solve the quorum problem. That was my first and foremost right there. Solve the quorum problem. All right. That proposal passed with 100% of the vote. 31 people voted for it. 2.2 million yes. All right. All it did was say we want Whale Vault to vote with its 7 million voting power in the Sandbox DAO. And at the time, we had failed 50% of our SIPs. So at the 8 SIPs at the time I wrote this, 4 of them had failed. Quorum was a big deal at that part. And the process was very, very simple. It was they were going to create a SIP Discord channel, and 3 days later, the proposal within the 3 days of this proposal passing. And then whenever a SIP was going to post to Snapshot, I would then copy paste the TLDR section to the Whale Discord, and discussion would ensue for 7 days. At the end of those 7 days, Whale Council then decides what their vote's going to be, having taken in community sentiment and reactions. And then by the ninth day, they issue their vote. And then there's a contingency should it not. After that, it's a $0 SIP, or dang it, $0 proposal. Very simple, and yeah, it passes. Cool. So when it passes, it was originally structured to operate the same way SebDAO was, which is just copy the proposal, and then whatever is on Snapshot gets reflected into our Sandbox DAO SIP. But I was convinced to do what I just described to you with the Discord react emoji reaction discussion way. And so I was persuaded to change it, and I did, to the TLDR emoji reaction thing, and all of that. By the time it gets implemented, SIP 16 and 17 are underway, and so we use that as a test case. The timing didn't work out, so we weren't able to. They weren't able to vote on it, but they were able to vote for the next SIP, which was SIP-18, which was SandDAO Podcast. I promise I did not time it like that. The SandDAO Podcast SIP was written back in July, and it took many, many months of curation to get us there. I had no control over when it was going to go to vote. It just so happened that happened to be the first one that they could really vote on, unfortunately for me. So I do the thing. I copy paste what I was supposed to. Here's the TLDR. As you can see, I left my personal opinion out. I did not say whether or not they should or shouldn't vote in the actual notification. All I did was just copy paste. I did notify them. I am the author of this one, so I self disclose. And then here's the discussion link. And as you can see, there was an obvious yes vote that was accrued, and there wasn't a lot of discussion had after that. So um, when that happened, that was New Year's Day. The 7 day discussion window closes, and I submit the results to the Whale Council. And well, uh, those are results: 5 yeses, 1 abstain, 0 nos. And it might show 1 no there and 2 abstains, but because I'm the post author here, I had to click one, and I wasn't voting abstain or no, so we -1 from each of those. It's 5 yes, 1 abstain, 0 no. And so I evolved that too, just to make sure everyone cannot accuse me of uh, being unfair or whatever. So it was a majority yes, but there wasn't much discussion those 7 days. I think I might have got a thumbs up on one of the chats to say, "Hey, cool, thanks for posting." But there was no discussion. But then at the end of those 7 days, the Whale Council responds that they chose to vote no. They chose to vote no, and at the time they cited the special counsel's negative recommendation, and also they referenced some of the negative, some of the no rationales of other voters in the discourse discussion thread. I am surprised and upset because as SIP author, or as the author of the proposal that generated this process, I know that emoji process was an important part. It was the only metric that we had to say actually how many people supported. The discussions were just that. It was just people talking to, which there weren't any. So I had nothing else to go off of except that. And so the Whale Council decided to vote no for reasons as they explained. I didn't know those reasons beforehand. I didn't know that they were going to vote no. I didn't know that they thought that way. So I was surprised, and that effectively tanked the proposal right there. 7.6 million in the negative, and all I could do at that point was just reiterate, I think it's worthwhile. It's literally 0.3% of the $4 million budget. $15,000. $15,000. Okay. And I've already published 54 episodes, so we know I'm going to do more. We know that. And I've demonstrated my commitment. I'm homegrown, I'm independent. I don't answer to the special counsel or anyone else. I'm able to produce content that is fair and has integrity. So I asked for the yes vote and wasn't able to overturn that no vote, and the SIP failed. So that right there are the results. That's going through everything. It was a very sad moment for me. It's very, very sad. And at the end of the day, I feel, I'm going to survive. We're going to be fine. SandDAO podcast is going to change. And as you see in the discussion forums here soon, we're going to change and we're going to scale down our operations because I've been paying for all of this myself. So I'm not going to continue paying for it in the same way. So those are the results. Very disappointing, very sad, but ultimately I understand a lot of people, so many people gave me their rationale. And even if I didn't agree, I did get why they voted no, and I understood. Makes sense. So let's get into the forum discussion. So the forum discussion was fascinating. The most interesting part about all of this was that, where is it? Here it is. One of the most responded to in the whole DAO because it drew in everybody and all of their interests, and you'll see why here in a second, had 105 people responded to it. Awesome. It was great discussions. Okay. So here's the SIP. We already went over that. All right. So I started off with intern starts off with great to see it. I've seen quite a number, and then gives me some of his concerns. I say, yep, absolutely. And we talk through those concerns. Most of his concerns were that I wasn't able, I didn't reprice it in USD, and that viewership is low, and reducing the episode's duration being long form. Okay. So I end up addressing that pretty early. I figure out a new way to make it easier and shorter by taking some things out of my normal podcast, and which we'll get into that later. What is the way forward? And then we start talking. And Kerchado, KCL, talks about how the format's too long. The number of episodes is kind of overwhelming. And it's not really proven. It doesn't reach enough people. And clarify some things. So we go through that. All right. And I kind of explain here that professionalizing it means that paying some money more than what I can pay for by myself. I can't pay 15,000 more for this podcast, and we turn professional by paying professional teammates to take work off my plate to do things better than I can. And yep, and if we can't get funded, then the current level of quality is all I have time and money to do by myself. And then more discussion comes about. Talking through. Um, HMAD talks about how instead of reducing its budget, we should explore ways to grow the listenership. Cool. So we're already starting to see some discussions take hold about, well, is this really good to fund when it's too long to digest and it doesn't reach enough people and it's not it's expensive per episode, which based on my research is not. If you Google how much is a podcast, actually, what is the average cost of a podcast, and that's one of the responses. It's 1,000 is on the lower end, unless you're bootstrapping like I was, in case you could get out the door for almost for free. So talk about cross referencing and yep, how I got this idea. I think it was episode like 20 something, where I started putting in cross references of episodes that I've already done. So for this episode 34, I was talking about the DAO relationship map. And then when I got to the ecosystem, I would say, hey, go look at episode 31 for the whole ecosystem thing. Here's a synopsis. And then when we got to episode SIPs number 1, 2, and 3, I covered that in episode 33. So I start doing a lot of cross referencing. The episodes really start building on themselves, and I'm in the stride by then. Okay, we start talking about cross-referencing still, and that's where we start talking about how I'm gonna start introducing bite-sized content. So the shorts creator, adding that person to the team. Here is the vote for the SIP that we looked at the very very beginning, and one of the delegates talks about how the viewership is limited, the reach is limited, and I talk about how at the height of 2021, Sandbox videos were getting about 1,000 a day. But nowadays, if you go YouTube search Sandbox videos, most are getting 100, maybe. And so the real story was its engagement on Twitch and Twitter, which is thousands of reposts and a couple dozen live viewers, and that was really really cool. Yeah, Roxy said in chat that it backfired on me. It absolutely backfired on me. It so backfired on me. The whale vault was the whale members were not obligated to vote yes for me just because I was giving them TLDRs. I didn't ask them to. I went out of my way to ensure that I didn't use that official TLDR message to influence the vote. I certainly had my own I certainly advocated for myself in the discussion part where I could talk my personal opinion, but not the official notification. So, uh, but yeah, you're right. It totally backfired. They end up voting for the first time ever, and yep, it went bad for me. So, uh, uh, so the SIP, or the whale proposal, Roxy says that they are to vote every SIP from now on. So we'll see how they vote going forward. All right, and more discussions about viewership. And this is where I address the council's negative recommendation. So the council's negative recommendation, I already read it, and then I already read my section where I talk about how SandDAO has received little to no reposting until Kunta came. When Kunta came as the new communications manager, he and I started referencing each other a lot more because he and I agreed that we're not in competition with each other. This is not a competition. We are growing the pie together. I bring in long form content, deep analysis, deeply researched. He brings in the official name, and he's able to see internal and bring them out to give them a proper space to discuss their rationale. And they've been doing that, and it's been awesome. My podcast isn't centered around that sort of stuff. It's centered around ecosystem things. So, uh, and then and then also we're very comparable. Like their highest video and my highest video, I was only 25 views less than that. That's tiny, very very tiny. It's a very small gap. And man, the Twitch support is just phenomenal. Like right now, thank you, Roxy, for participating. Twitch support has been phenomenal. That to me was the real story. Like, we've been a Twitch community for quite some time, so it was so cool to see that. And then I addressed the $1,000 per episode. How yeah. Anyways, I didn't think that the $400 per episode really accounted for all of everyone's time and effort. And when I looked on Upwork and Fiverr, they charge very reasonable rates, and that I mean, I couldn't. I didn't want to lose money. I want to actually pay them, ask the SIP dollar for what I could pay, and then oh yeah, like I said, we complement each other. We're not in competition. And at the end of the day, it's 0.3%, man. $15,000 on a 15.5 million sand budget. That's about anywhere from $4 to $8 million USD, depending on what the exchange rate is of sand. Very small, very small. And then talk about uh, more stuff about relevancy. This one this one resonated with me. Crypto Diplo's post here really resonated with me. I I choose my words carefully here. The early days of the DAO were what they were. It's well documented on this podcast exactly what and why and how that all happened and what my opinion is of it. I agree that I have a fundamentally different viewpoint than the Sandbox Special Counsel and the DAO itself. And I have been a strong advocate for transparency, disclosure, and decentralization. And right now, the DAO is undergoing a transition from kind of a centralization approach to more progressively decentralized. And we're getting there. But in the early days, it didn't seem like we were getting there fast enough. And it seemed like we weren't sure what was going on. So, anyways, I really appreciated this comment because I felt like it represented my my viewpoint in many cases. I wouldn't exactly say that I think we should disregard their viewpoint, but we've known for a long time that the special counsel has not exactly been um, keeping up with the day to day of the DAO. So their negative opinion, their negative recommendation, isn't necessarily informed by what I would say people who understand the nuances of our DAO. And that's because they're very good reasons. They have lives, they have things they're doing. They are running, some of them are running humongous multinational corporations. Like, I get it. They have other things they're doing. But they issued a negative recommendation, and I feel like it was not telling the complete picture. So, also, that part there, I have been critical of the DAO early on, and I'm sure that did not earn me a lot of friends within the DAO itself. I think I've since apologized to Cyril for not giving him more grace and patience and that sort of thing. I'm pretty sure the relationship between myself and the DAO admin team is repaired to the extent that it can be. But I'm sure I did not earn a ton of friends when I was critical of the DAO, and what I saw were contradictions and things that just weren't adding up. I've since changed my opinion big time. Kunta has really done the world, uh, done us so good with transparency and really giving Cyril and the DAO admin team a place to discuss, and that's really appreciated. It's so appreciated. Look at a few. I've covered all of their episodes at this point. Just look at a few episodes back, and you'll see all the episodes that I've covered for them, especially episode one. Episode one was the big one. Okay. And then more talk about, yeah, here's Kunta saying exactly what he and I have been, what he and I have been saying for a while now. We are not in, we are not in competition with each other. We are trying to build the ecosystem together. And Kunta has never that I know of. He has never tried to pit me against anyone. He's not taken away from me in that regard at all. And he's just been a good partner to the SandDAO podcast and the Sandbox DAO Digging in the Sand podcast. And we complement each other. and we don't have to be the same thing. And it's okay. We can both exist. So he has remained wholly neutral, and he did not give me any unfair competitive advantages or anything like that. So yeah, I really appreciated the way he handled it. And here's his response to Crypto Diplo, talking about the mistrust that he saw there. And I agree with both of them. Just there's there's a lot of nuance. If you've been in the community, you know there's a lot of nuance there. And yeah, everyone's trying to do their best. And we're doing better every day, and we're building together as an ecosystem. Yeah, that's right. I've had two SIPs. One was a $0 SIP, which was SIP-14. That one did pass. That was to have a in-game equipment filter. I also did that podcast before, SandDAO podcast episode on that before. All right, so then, yeah, I confirm Kunta has not given me any preferential treatment, nor would I want him to. It's to me that's a short term game for a long term damage, and I was not, nope, did not want that. Nor did Kunta ever offer anything like that. He did end up critiquing my SIP because of his vast experience in podcasting. So my original proposal was much bigger than this. I was going to give something like 30 or 60 episodes. The cost was higher and the team was bigger. But then they negotiated me down to 15 episodes and 1,000 cost per episode. Okay. And then old one talks about on another delegate talks about his perspective and how SandDAO podcast isn't going to solve the lack of attention given to the sandbox, and I completely agree. My episodes weren't going to fix the the small viewership. It was going to keep the community informed. It was going to keep going with education and updates. That's really what this was. Intern, another delegate, starts talking about their perspective, and yeah, I really appreciated each delegate's input. It was very helpful. And Kusha, who is a fellow content creator, talks about their perspective and concerns, mostly about just solely focusing on the SandDAO podcast and not maybe things that are pertinent to the game or to other content creators. I understand Kusha's point. I don't agree with it, but ultimately, I was grateful for the discussion. Yeah, Sebga and Kusha then have a discussion. Roxy comes in, starts another delegate, and starts talking about reaching quorum. Oh, that was to Kusha to just vote to reach quorum, and good discussion there, talking about quorum and how we want to reach it as best we can, and more discussion about the commitment I have, and I was very very committed, and delegations. So you can see these conversations just start going in many different places. The SIP, it wasn't just about the SIP, it was about people's beliefs. Like this is one of the first ones that people really got to take a hold of as the delegate and really exercise their delegate power. And all I've interviewed a lot of the delegates and heard how they wanted to vote. This is one of the first ones, fortunately or unfortunately, that they get to really decide how they want to be as a delegate. And you can see that play out here in the comments, just talking back and forth of why should they vote yes? Why should they vote no? What's important? What isn't? What should we be focusing on? Should this SIP pass under these conditions or should it change? And then I start talking about what delegation is and all the different things that I'm trying to do. I'm not trying to solve Sandbox's player retention problem. I'm not able to solve that. I'm not going to make anyone sand millionaires. I'm not going to make us Roblox. I'm not built to solve that. I'm built to address the lack of understanding and to educate and to provide news updates. And I'm just going to keep doing that if I'm funded. So more context. I'm a homegrown podcast, and here is one that I'm going to be doing soon. which is what is a foundation company, and all the very interesting things I learned. I'll probably be doing that later this week or next week. All the fun things I learned, and then more discussion from other delegates. Here's Meow talking about whole point of the DAO is open discussions, diverse voices, and processes we can all learn from. More discussions about delegations. So these discussions are just encompassing everything. It was really, really cool, and I really appreciated it. I feel like we were growing here as a DAO, and more discussions, talks, conflict resolutions, and here's one I wanted to stay on for a second. Here I kind of explained the timeline because some people kept saying that SandDAO was, why would we fund a second podcast, SandDAO? Why wouldn't we just stick with the Sandbox DAO's official podcast? And so my response was is that, well, voting for the SandDAO now doesn't commit anyone to voting for it in the future, nor does it commit anyone to voting for. They were talking about fridge magnets. Why wouldn't just anyone vote for anything at that point? Okay, got it. I submitted this SIP back in July. So that was here back in July, SIP number 6. And okay. And I was on SandDAO 6 at the time.
At that moment, we got the COVID. The traditional industry is not that good, so we just
That was my interview with Old One. Before Old One was a delegate, Old One is involved in another delegation, one of the largest ones in the Mochaverse called Mocha CN. It's Mocha Chinese community. Go look at SandDAO Podcast 6 if you're interested in if you're ApeCoin DAO or if you're Mochaverse. Mocha CN is a important player in those ecosystems. So go check that out. And so I was at SandDAO 6 at the time I started this podcast, this SIP. SandDAO 6. All right. It went through 5 months of curation and it was intense. It was a lot of back and forth to talk about pricing and metrics and all sorts of things. By the time it went to vote on December 24th, I'd posted my 53rd episode. We're putting together called the Community Council SIP. Conta explains that in episode 5, so I don't think I'm really revealing anything crazy here. That was SandDAO podcast 53, which was Dit's reaction to the Digging in the Sand podcast episodes 3 and 4, talking about the 12 delegates, community, progressive decentralization. Great episode. Go check it out, please. And then when episode so backtracking a little bit, when episode 1 came out on November 17th, that was the SandDAO official podcast came out November 17th. I was already on my 42nd episode of SandDAO. And I didn't even realize it until I clicked on it that the 42nd episode was my delegate interview of they drop you 2 million. Oh shoot, it was Crypto Diplo. Anyways, the one I clicked on was my delegate interview of Old One, which was a hilarious kind of like completion of the circle. But yeah, I was on my 42nd episode of SandDAO when Digging in the Sand episode 1 came out on November 17th. And my 53rd episode when it went to vote on December 24th. So anyways, Dits and SandDAO, we cover so many different topics. We cover it very differently. I do long form content. I research it intensely, and I try to be as objective and critical as I'm able to. And I delve into topics that the Sandbox DAO admin team isn't able to, can't, or doesn't want to cover, like Birth of DAO episode. I covered that one, sent out to everyone, kind of teased it a little bit, and had a little bit of fun. I was just so excited that I was able to piece together all the relationships, and I just couldn't. I couldn't help myself. So this was when episode 34. Go take a look. I know I didn't get every single connection right. I emphasized roles when they're not really that way in real life, and I did the best I could with Google searches. That's all I had available to me, and just searching it, figuring it out. But that was me revealing, kind of how I thought the Sandbox DAO came to be based on what information was known at the time, and the timeline associated behind everything. So I delve into those topics, and I delve in it at a much faster pace. Although, Kunta, if you're watching, if you keep doing this every single week, you're going to end up outpacing me eventually. so, I was trying to get it out as fast as I could, and then also when the delegates came out and when they were announced, I did 10 of them in 7 days. And that was because it was right before Christmas. I wanted to make sure I got them all in before Christmas. And I wanted to get them in as soon as possible because I wanted everyone to know who they were before the next SIPs came out. And that way people could have decided, what do they want to do.
That portion when it comes to the SandFam voter, your delegate style, and what you want to accomplish. Is there anything else you'd like to comment on before we move to those final 3 questions?
That was SandDAO Podcast 38. That was my first delegate interview with Sebga back on November 16th. So I did 10 delegate interviews in 7 days. They were very, very gracious to each of those delegates now to give me their time. Some of them did it live. Some of them did it via text only, but each of them did it. I wasn't able to get 2, and Roxy, who's in the chat now, I was able to do that with podcast 54 just a few days ago. So go check that out. And so that's what it takes to keep up with what goes on in the DAO. A lot of stuff happens quickly, and I have to push out episodes constantly in order to keep everyone educated and up to date. And so funding this SIP meant paying a team to address things I don't have the time to do, which is episodes are way too long. And part of that's because I don't have time to edit them down. And also because I enjoy researching and providing the content in a comprehensive way. If someone wants to look at all the evidence, here it is. And if you disagree, well, here's the evidence I based it off of. And I just bite-sized content I don't like it as much. And so I was doing this for free, and I decided that's the way I wanted to do it. I also wanted to make it available to many more platforms, but I didn't have the time to go through the manual process of those 7 to 9 extra platforms that came with RSS.com's package. And I wanted to create more shorter viral content, like on TikTok, YouTube Shorts, Instagram Reels, all that. But it required more funding because I'd reached my max of what I could pay for by myself and what I could commit to time-wise. So that was about halfway through the 106 replies. That was my response there. And then here comes Roxy, who's in the chat. I'm gonna go over this one. Roxy voted no and gave me. Go look at SandDAO Podcast 54. We talk about this specifically. Roxy gave me extremely well thought out. They all did. All the delegates did. But Roxy made a point to explain not just why he voted no, but how he got to that decision, talking to 40 people in the SandFam to talk to them about what was their interest in the SandDAO podcast SIP. What do they want to see out of it? And he gave me the results of that survey, which was gold. I don't know if many of you know, but I am a data nerd. I love statistics. I love parsing through data to find what's relevant and what's valuable. That's why I do the SandDAO Checkbook and the SandDAO Scoreboard. I keep track of statistics so that I can derive relevance and value from them. That's exactly what Roxy did, but on a personal, individual level by contacting people as a delegate and asking them, "What do you all think, SandFam?" Like, that was powerful. I had nothing negative to say about this. The fact that he voted no hurts, but the why was just too good to say anything against. It was phenomenal. So I really appreciated him explaining how he talked to the people, and here's what they said, and here's my opinion on it, and this is what I'm basing it on. It's too expensive per episode. I don't think it contributes significantly enough to improve the platform itself. It's specific to the DAO, and it's not important enough to the builders from what I talked to them about. Like, it was cool. It was cool. And he didn't shy away from acknowledging that he was appreciative of my efforts. And I just appreciated the way he went about it. This to me is the ideal way to tell someone you're going to vote their proposal down. But he did it. He did it splendidly. So, uh, told me in the end it wasn't a rejection of the podcast, but it was, the higher priority of him being a delegate. I appreciated it. I really did. So I was like, yeah, it's really sad to see it. Oh, yeah. Roxy said in chat just now, the ideal way to be rejected. Absolutely, Roxy. That is the ideal way to be rejected. And I appreciated the extra time and effort that you put into crafting this. It was so appreciated. And so I said, man, in the forum response to him, I said, oh, I'm really sad, but I respect it. Muchas gracias, mi amigo. Ecuador, Ecuador, Ecuador. And yeah. Yep. Oh, well, here's something in my response that I wanted to mention that I didn't really talk about because there wasn't really a place for it. But I'm a builder too. When I introduced myself, I introduced that I was president of MetaWorlds and that how we had published 2 studios. Well, what might not be too um, obvious about that is that I understand firsthand what the builders are saying when they say this is not helping the builders, like the actual Vox editor or game maker. I get it. It doesn't help them monetize any better. I experienced the same thing with MetaWorld Studio. We weren't able to monetize either. And I spent a whole year trying my hardest to find a way to do it. And eventually, I don't know if I'm going to get to it because of the way the vote went and winding everything down, but I want to do an episode on the business of sandbox publishing and kind of show you the numbers of why it didn't work for me. And we know it doesn't work for others because Touche and Tempest both took a step back from building, and they were one of the top builders in the ecosystem. But they hear their posts and when I posted SIP-7 for a Builders Challenge working group, one of the reasons why I did this was because back in September, Touche posted about stepping back. Pretty detailed post. I recommend you go read it. But he posted here, he's taken a full step back, and all the reasons why. Financial circumstances made it difficult. That's the monetization thing I was talking about. He was one of, if not the top builder when it comes to studios. I mean, almost everyone has played Fungi Frenzy. It's just very talented, right? So not just him, but then Tempest, 20 days later, says the same thing. Another legacy OG, really talented studio says goodbye. In 1 month, we lose 2 high-profile builders in the community. And what was the reason? There's some shortcomings, some lack of transparency, some things that they consider to be unfair, a little bit of mismanagement perhaps, or lack of respect. They have their reasons for it. I recognize what they're saying. It took me a while to get to where I became a trusted partner. It only happened like late last year. I haven't been a trusted partner for very long, but it took a while to get there, and it took a lot of effort to make it happen. And Tempest and Touche are both partners. Touche, when we interviewed him, turns out he's an advanced partner, so that was cool. But in any case, you can see there that they when I ran the numbers, I couldn't sustain the business model. The catalysts were too expensive to mend. The marketplace wasn't having enough activity to buy what I minted, and the experiences didn't have a way to monetize, and it didn't work. It didn't work out. So at the end of Builders Challenge 1 in May of 2024, I was ready to step back from the sandbox because I reached the end of my ability to pay for it out of pocket and myself. And so I was going to step back from the sandbox and just move on. I did my best. I did everything I could. The monetization just isn't there. The business model doesn't work for me, and so I was going to do that. But then, guess what happens in May 28th? The DAO launches May 28th, 2024, and that lights a fire in me. It gives me my motivation back because I'm a business owner. I'm a creative entrepreneur. I create things, games, and I compose music and I write novels. I publish them to Amazon and iTunes. I create, I game. I've been a really competitive gamer and a casual gamer. I've been the whole gamut. I've organized big events like world record breaking things, the Guinness World Record stuff, and the DAO is all of that. It's business, it's community, it's leadership, it's gaming, all of it together. And that's where I talked about like the people, the product, the purpose, the ecosystem. Yeah. So that's the DAO. And it just lights puts a light in me. Oh, here's SandDAO 30 with Touche.
And on the website it said it was established in 2010. What's the connection there?
So Touche Studios has been around since I was like 20 years old. I thought I was like pretty clever and came up with the name Touche. My last name is Shay. And so I was like, hey, Touche. Yeah, funny.
Touche. Right on. That was so cool. I love Touche. I love him to death. And so yeah, if it hadn't been for the DAO, I would have stepped back as well. I put all of my effort into succeeding, and I did it for over a year at that point. I had been in Sandbox since 2021 as a gamer and a landowner and an avatar owner, but I didn't really become a builder until I discovered GMF in 2022 or 23 and wrote a proposal, got accepted for GMF 2023. Then Builders Challenge 1 took over from GMF 2023. We did Builders Challenge 1 with floor droppers. We ranked 7th out of 400, and it was awesome. And then we were in Alpha Season 4. So got really, really lucky. But in any case, that was that. And then Kusha rightly points out success criteria. That was the tougher thing to do because how do you measure, something that's brand new like us and what's really important? And so I said that what I think is important isn't views because we're not getting them. And yes, my hours are long, but there's a max I can commit, and it's only 15K of 8 million bucks, and it's 4 to 8 million depending on the trading of sand. So, but ultimately, I think that we should base it on engagement, like how many retweets there are, or how many live viewers we have, because that helps me. That's where SandFam is. Yeah. Hey, Denkoi, good to see you. Yeah, exactly. Denkoi says in the chat, not counting the others that leave but don't share. Absolutely. That was just the most high profile ones. There are others who decided that they couldn't make it as well and it wasn't for them, and they have since departed as well. That's very, very good point, Denkoi. Yeah. And it's not like they want to leave. I didn't want to leave the sandbox when I was deciding to take a step back. I couldn't sustain what I was doing, and it was either continue paying everything out of pocket, and development's not cheap. Floor droppers took about $20,000 to build, and even ranking 7th that I did, we only got 9,000 sand, which at the time was trading at about 26 cents. So we did not break even at all. But that's how much it costs to create a real thing. You've got developers' time and effort, and if you want to build a good one, you've got to pay them to build you a good one. So I couldn't do that one again. I couldn't pay another 20,000. That was yeah. That was a rough one. A rough loss. So that's when I decided that I couldn't make it back on Catalyst. The numbers weren't working. And you know, Sebga very graciously says here, Lanzer's offering high value, and I so appreciated that. Thank you. Just all the people who back and forth, good concerns about it being expensive, and thank you to everyone else who supported. And here we start really talking about right about this point in time, singling out SandDAO. Why should SandDAO be the sole recipient of this? And to be honest, I get it. I understand. Crafter had a SIP idea a while ago that, and I was supportive of it, of being a full-time content creator for the Sandbox DAO, but it wasn't able to make it to vote. So it was curated, and I don't think it made it past curation. I was very supportive of it, but it didn't make it, and mine did, probably only because my professional background is in contract writing, proposal writing, and negotiations, and so I do this for a living, and I was just able to see it through. Yeah, and they said, let's create a SIP for Andy Ritchie and Shakespeare and Panda Pops and Kami and Vision and many other content creators. Like, why wouldn't we do that? Well, in my view, maybe we should be doing that. I have no. Sure, I'll support them too. I felt that SandDAO podcast gives benefit directly to the DAO, and yeah, that was mine. And people see points and agreed, and and then Kami rightly points out that Panda, Cyber Dragon, and Kami are staff at the Sandbox, so they have a normal salary and doing streams as part of their work. Lucas and Joseph, who's the Vision X, have had him on SandDAO a couple times now. They're part of the ambassador program, and they get rewarded for Sand. I am neither an ambassador nor am I staff. I get nothing. I am not compensated in any way by the Sandbox, or really anybody. I'm just doing this because I enjoy it and just doing it. And there's multiple tracks. I did apply to be an ambassador when the ambassador program came online. I didn't hear back, so I don't know if my application got lost or what, but I did apply. And this is where that very interesting remark about maybe Kami says maybe we should have a community boost chest that rewards streamers, and that people pick up on that a lot. See that right there? 8 uptokes right there. A lot of people said, yeah, we should do that. And so, where is it? Who else? Definix, I think, says pretty much the same thing. I think others should deserve that. He thought that I should deserve to be paid for my consistency. The cost is questionable. However, he would like to. He's confused about some of the proposal parts, and prefer to see the funds elsewhere. Okay, where was it? Not sure if 1,000 per episode is really worth it. Like I mentioned in the beginning, based on my research, 1,000 per episode is on the lower end. So if you Google search how much per episode is a podcast, you will see a lot of different opinions, but a few of them will say from 0 to 5,000 is the lower range. From 5,000 to 15,000 is the upper range. There's a couple websites that have it about that. And so 1,000 is, in the grand scheme of things, not that much per episode. And I planned on, getting better rates after, because I can buy in bulk at that point. and I just couldn't commit to it because I hadn't yet negotiated that down on Fiverr and all that. But yeah, I was gonna stretch it out to something closer to 20 or 25. And who was it? Who was it that talked about the community, the community streamer thing as well? Someone asked me if I was doing this for individual gain. I was not. Nope. And then that was what, a few days ago, right? 7 days ago. So an hour before that, I had posted my interview with Roxy Miguel.
Contacted so many people to get their opinion, and then you
I know you're
shared that
watching,
knowledge
Roxy.
in the forum post, because I was learning too. Like I get feedback all the time, but it's not all representative of all SandFam.
To think about it is that my priority will be the gaming ecosystem.
So there's Roxy, our latest delegate, talking about his viewpoint on how does he want to vote, what's important to him, and then I updated my stats. At that point, I'd interviewed 35 guests. So as of episode 54 with Roxy, I interviewed 35 guests and I've covered 11 SIPs. This one makes it 12. So 15,000 is going to help build a better podcast. And hold on, we're getting to it. We're getting to the one that I've been searching for. More discussion about how the budget should be applied here, and here respect the outcome. All right, so at the time, 7 days ago, a week ago, I was at 52% yes, 47% no. So it'd been battling back and forth and at varying degrees. At one point it was 2 million no right at the very beginning because one of the delegates got the drop on me. They voted no before I could even vote yes on my own proposal. And then after that it took over. It had a big yes vote, and then it slowly just like crept back to where you see now 7 days ago. Okay. And then, here's the comment about why do we need a second podcast? And then they also asked me to produce what is the average viewer for SandDAO podcast. So I looked it up on YouTube. It changes per, I published this on like, I think 7 different platforms. So they're different per platform, but on YouTube, my episodes, 116 hours have been watched of my 54 episodes. And the average view is 10 minutes across all my episodes. And sometimes people ask me, like, you do all this couple hours worth and people only watch 10 minutes. Like, that's okay. I do this primarily because I love it first. And I do it because I have the data that I want to present, and then take from it what you will. And that's it. And then I list off all the stuff that is in my corner, in my favor. SandDAO does not answer to the Sandbox Game Company or the DAO admin team. SandDAO cannot be fired by the Sandbox Game Company or the DAO admin team. SandDAO is independently produced. SandDAO is not required to honor the Sandbox Game Company or the DAO admin team request that it not cover a topic. And for the record, they never asked me to. But even if they did, I'm not required to honor it. I don't work for them. SandDAO is not bound by any non-disclosure or non-compete agreement. SandDAO can be as critical as is necessary to the benefit of the community. And some of those episodes that I've done were really harsh and critical. Like, check out 31, 32, and the one about the new SIP process, the one about the DAO Medium article, and I've since softened my stance because of the new transparency from DIT's episodes 1 through 5. But I was very critical. I was getting super critical because the transparency just wasn't there. And I can do that without getting in trouble because I'm independently produced. So then there was a question about why did I need to go to 9 more platforms? And that's where I revealed, this is part of, shoot, I just messed up my, oopsie. Darn it. Hold on, let me find my place. I just messed it up. There it is. So when you have an RSS account, which is a podcast platform, it's one of the oldest and on the internet when it comes to podcast RSS feeds. So here, right here, are the automatic ones. You just click a button, and anytime you click publish, it'll publish your episode to Spotify, Amazon Music, Podcast Index, Listen Notes, and the RSS community. Also, you can publish it to Apple Podcast, Pandora, TuneIn, iHeartRadio, and Deezer, but you have to go to their website and then manually submit it. That's the ones I'm telling you. I didn't have enough time to do that. Not with the amount of time that I was putting into it already. So I was going to hire an assistant to do that for all the episodes. That's what I meant by more platforms. It already comes, as in the package that I was paying for to have this account that I was paying for out of my own pocket already had that available. So as soon as I went to Apple Podcasts, they would publish it because I had an account with RSS. All right. And that's, I just explained that right here. Same thing. And Pandora is a household name when it comes to music. So it was a no-brainer to try and publish to them. And yep. So SandDAO podcast first published 201 days ago in mid-June 2020, whereas Digging in the Sand published 47 days ago in late November. What are we looking to achieve? Kusha asked, and I said just to keep going. Dits and SandDAO cover very different topics. We cover them differently. Best part is we're not required to choose one over the other. It's because it's not a competition. It doesn't have to be me versus them, and it's not me versus the other podcast. So this is the one thing I wasn't able to answer. He kept asking, how are we supposed to measure its success and determine whether or not this SIP actually benefits us? And I don't know. It isn't clear to me yet how we should be measuring the impact, because while views are an obvious metric, they're very misleading in this ecosystem. Years ago, we used to get thousands of views. Now we get hundreds of views. So my intuition told me that what I should be measuring is engagement, which is like retweets, replies, increase in voting, forum activity. And when I did those 15 new episodes that were then going to be done a lot better, I would monitor the difference and then report on that difference to see if what value was actually given there. That's what the risk was. The risk was the confidence and the trust and giving me the resources I needed to build the podcast better, to deliver more value. That's what the risk was for this. So, yeah, that's what that was. More discussions. There was a good discussion between Sebga and Viverson about what examples we should be using and how many streamers are in play, and what about what about their pricing. Really good discussion there. And what did Viverson ask me here? He said, why don't you think the other streamers didn't submit a proposal? And it's basically because when the DAO came out, most of us didn't know what the DAO was. And the only reason I myself was able to DAO faster was because I have a business background. I have a proposal writing background. And as soon as the DAO was released, I had stopped building experiences, or I'd put a pause on my third experience because of the funding problem. And I had a lot of time on my hands to devote to a new project. And so I devoted to the DAO, and I learned what it was. And I figured out how to, once I knew that all you had to do was write a proposal, I've been doing that my whole career. So I just wrote one. And so that's why the others didn't do it. They didn't even know what it was. They didn't know what they could get from it. And they didn't know how to DAO. A lot of politics are involved. You have to do a lot of campaigning. You have to ask people for votes, and then change your great idea when they disagree. Otherwise, you won't get their vote. So you have to really balance it out, and it's tough. It's a lot of time and effort. So that's why they didn't do it. And lots of questions, answers, and discussions. And Sebga asked, is it possible to produce more episodes, ideally to produce throughout 2025, or is this unthinkable? And I said, where was it? Oh yeah, here's the list of streamers, really well-known people in the community who stream already. So he's asking like why don't they get a SIP? And they do, they just have to write one. And that's how this works. And Byverson said, well, if this is yes, then how do you think everyone else is going to how this is going to apply to everyone else, and what's the perception going to be? And Kunta came in and gave some clarifications for some things and more discussion. And Kunta said exactly what I thought too. This has been the most constructive. Really, like there were a lot of humongously different opinions, black and white. People were debating hard, but it was constructive. We learned a lot from each other, I think, and I think we learned a lot about our DAO, what we wanted out of all this. So it was very respectful for almost all of it. It was respectful. People were debating the issues and not necessarily going at it after each other. There was a little bit, but debates got heated, and that's how it went. And there was a little bit of apologies back and forth to each other because some people, the debates got really heated. So they're like, "Oh, I'm sorry if you felt like I disrespected you," and like, "Nah, I'm sorry that I was intense here." And like it was just good. It was good discussion. I feel like we learned a lot from each other. And I again reiterate, we are non-competition between Digging in the Sand podcast and SandDAO. We're building the same ecosystem. We have multiple $1 million budget. It's not a competition. And oh, here it is. Sir Alokin. Sir Alokin came in. He was a new user, new to the DAO, looks like, and proposed that as an alternative that we have a combined SIP where everyone can receive money or sand based on their contributions to streaming and content creation, which is similar to what Kami proposed. And when Kami proposed that, I thought that's a great idea. But I was so engrossed in the way the DAO was going, or the way the SIP was going, that I didn't think about any other SIPs at the time. But when he said that, Sir Alokan, it triggered something in my brain that, wow, we really could do a combined SIP and just have like almost like a Thank Ape. Show you all that. Right. So if you go to Thank Ape here, Thank Ape has a reward system. See if I can get in. Let me in. Come on, come on, come on, come on. There we go. So Thank Ape is a reward system. Okay, so you start earning, you connect your wallet, and when you do that, they're like quests. So let's go to the streamer, host and streamer quest. Host an X Twitter space. Here it is. Host an X Twitter space for your Ape Chain NFT or in meme coin community and achieve 2,500 listens. If you get that and you connect your wallet and it verifies, you get 300 Ape as a reward. So just substitute it with Sand. Host an X Twitter space for your Sandbox community and achieve 2,500 listens, and you get 300 Sand. And it's a bounty system, so anyone can come in and claim it. And so we could do the same thing. Thank Ape. We could, and so me being the I've already submitted 8 SIPs already. Me being the SIP creator that I am, think, oh my gosh, that's wonderful. We should definitely do that. Meow instantly chimes in, Secret Meow, and says, great idea. Sebga, I think, says, Sebga, some more discussion. And I've seen it has been made. Dr. Metaverso, I think he also agrees with what's going on. Where is it? Come on. It's going to be here soon. Lanzer's an independent streamer. Yep. And so by Verson here says, absolutely, that's a great idea, Sir Alokan. And so I say that's a great idea. Also, the intern mentioned that as well. So Sir Alokan, Intern, and Kami all mentioned a similar reward system for the collective content creators within the ecosystem. I definitely supported that. And I said I was going to make a SIP about it. So about, 10 minutes later, I go to the SIP ideas and I post a new SIP idea and I call it the Sand Chest. It already has nine upvotes, but the Sand Chest is basically what they just talked about. It's kind of like Thank Ape, what I just showed. I have the context here of how DAO's post, or the intern's post here, then Kami's post, and then Sir Alokan's post, all kind of give us this idea of we should have a creative, a pool of rewards for creators. And so I invite Sir Alokan and Kami up as co-authors. I can't invite Intern because he's a delegate. He can't be a SIP author. And so what I propose is we earmark sand out of the budget that's going to come up at the end of January. We create a sand chest out of it, and we create a transparent system that fairly distributes creators based on some sort of ranking. And also we define content creators in categories so that we're YouTube people are with YouTube people and such, so forth. But basically a Thank Ape, but for the sandbox. So I wrote that SIP while SandDAO podcast SIP was going on, because it was looking a little rough. But we still had the yes vote at the time. And so let's keep going, and then here it comes. Here comes the next update on January 4th, 1:33 p.m. I look at the results and I have a majority no vote. I pretty much guessed what happened. And yes, we did achieve quorum at 110%, but we did so with WhaleVault's 7.6 million no vote, which created a 59% no and a 39% yes. And that there's the why that we talked about at the beginning of the episode. We went through all of that, and I was unable to recover from that. And it went away after that. So got a lot of things, people reaching out saying thank you. And here's where I revealed that, yeah, I did plan on making the $15,000 last a little bit more than 15 episodes. I think people believe the 15,000 is not cost effective because the I should say special counsel cited 400 per episode, and oh, nice, because the special counsel cited 400 per episode, and I don't think that fully captures all the costs of Digging in the Sand podcast. And my research showed that 1,000 is reasonable, and here I included a couple screenshots of the websites I was talking about, where the low end showed $350 to 1,000 being the low end, 1,500 to 5,000 being the high end, and then the second one showed anywhere from 1 to 15,000 per episode is one of the estimates from a podcast creation site. So I couldn't promise that I would be able to do 15,000 with more than 15 episodes, because I hadn't yet been able to negotiate that lower price on Fiverr and all the discounted rates. So more discussion. Problems not only cost, it's also performance. And let's keep going. We're almost through this. We're almost done. Oh, here's an interesting part between Hishmad and I. Hishmad said that we need... Who did I respond? Oh, there we go. Given the significant variation in production costs, particularly human costs, across different locations, I'm utilizing the committee's benchmarks to ensure appropriate comparisons. For instance, I anticipate that production costs in Indonesia will not exceed 200 per episode. This would differ significantly in the USA, hence the importance of the committee's benchmarks. That was Hishmad. What I said was, that must be where our disconnect is, because the team is made up of people from Indonesia, Philippines, Canada, America, and Italy. I built the team multinational, and editing alone costs more than $200 per episode. Usually it goes by the minute. So anything over 300, you're probably looking at more than $200. Just for editing. All right, so I referenced here, I searched someone on Fiverr, Gizmokson here. $50 here for 15 minutes, $100 for 30 minutes, $250 for more than 30 minutes, so up to $120. And he's from Uzbekistan. So some of his competitors showed upwards of $500 and more for the same, and some of them didn't even exceed 30 minutes. So the situation is a little bit different outside of Fiverr, a little bit, but you're talking about a mix of the skill, the trust, the credibility, and the price you have to pay, and I have to balance that in a way that delivers a result. And I can't. I've got to do it in a way that I know I will succeed, and that's the way I can succeed. So that's what I built my proposal around, and I stand by it. And then another delegate votes, basically for the reason the council recommended. And here we're almost done here. So I was bummed to see it all go the way that it did. And to all those who voted no, we're all still friends. I don't feel like I don't want anyone to avoid me or to feel awkward around me because they voted no against my SIP. It's okay. It's all right. Ultimately, it would have been a yes vote had WhaleVault not voted 7.6 million. No. So we would have been fine had it not been for that. But no one needs to avoid me for I'm not throwing a temper tantrum. Just give me a little bit to recover, which I already feel recovered right now. Come to terms with it, and then feeling the
emotional damage.
Feeling the emotional damage. But SandDAO is going to change whether SIP-18 passes or not. It did not pass. SandDAO is going to change. And here I said if it passes, it gets bigger and better. If it doesn't pass, it gets scaled down to what I can manage by myself. But I'm still here. And then check out the new Sand Chess SIP idea. So, yeah. Yeah, and then constructive stuff. And that's why I voted yes. Yes, I was going to do the very best I could with it. And Sebgo voted 80% yes, 20% no, and I don't think it's appreciated just how much you can split your vote. Like Sebgo thought that he liked it, and but the 20% no was a recognition of the apprehension and the arguments for no. I did a similar thing for the Sandbox Ambassador SIP. I voted half yes, half no because it looked like a clear yes, a clear positive to me, but so many of the ambassadors were against it. So I felt that it was right to split my vote. And so if it had been presented at 7.5K, would it have been approved? Dankoy, probably. Probably, yeah. 500 an episode. I don't think people would have really batted an eye at it. But it's the same thing in 8-Coin DAO. Price is a big factor, and a lot of people, feel how they feel about seeing a large price tag, and they felt the same way about this one. So the voting period is ended. That was a day ago, yesterday, and here are the results with the quorum reached. 22.6 no, 16.9 yes. And then I give my response saying, firstly, everyone, thank you for the lively discussion. I learned a lot. I feel like we all learned a lot, really. Second, like I mentioned in my emotional damage post that I just went over a few minutes ago, I'm bummed, but I'm satisfied I did everything I could to show the community that SandDAO was worth it. It's worthwhile, and I'm gonna survive. I'm gonna be all right. WhaleVault's 7.6 million vote definitely turned the tide, turned it from a yes to a no. I previously mentioned here how I opened the door to that involvement. I authored the proposal that enabled them to vote. And as you can see clearly, that did not entitle me to a yes vote. There were no backroom deals there, and I didn't expect them to I didn't feel entitled to a yes vote. I was surprised that they voted no because it wasn't in line with the process that was approved in their DAO. But they always had the authority to vote how they wanted to, and they did. And I feel like we grew closer as a community, even though it didn't turn out the way I wanted. It went the way it needed to, and we're learning and we're growing, and this is what it means to DAO. We're DAOing. So don't feel like you have to avoid me. We are still friends, and I'm not coming for any of you who voted no. Not even WhaleVault. I'm just disappointed. And here's the vote table. We already went over that. And big ol' smiley face. Don't forget, Sanchez SIP. Go look at that. Please look at the Sanchez SIP. It's in the SIP ideas forum. And yep, some responses to that yesterday, or just Dr. Metaverso. And that's it. That's going through the results. So cost was a factor. Redundancy between bits and SandDAO. Fairness to other streamers. Value to the ecosystem. There you go. So those are a lot of the comments. All right, now we're almost done here. What's next? So now that we're not funded, what do I do now? Here's what I'm going to do. SandDAO podcast is going to change. I can't pay for it all anymore. And it's going to change in size. Instead of doing long form stuff about deeply researched topics, I'm going to change to, I think, short, very short weekly updates. Those updates are going to look a little bit like this. Like if I had done an update earlier this week, it would have been, here are the SIPs that gone to vote. Here are the SIPs ideas go out there right now. Any sort of news items or updates of a note here. And then here are the episodes that I did last. That might take 10 minutes. And I'll post it, on a Monday, and I'll just post a weekly 10-minute update. I won't be doing in-depth topics anymore, and because I just won't have the time commitment to spend on it. I do have a couple more that I want to get through, just because I'm really passionate about some of these topics I want to get through. The next one I'm doing, probably next week, it's going to be, what is a foundation company? I think I must have spent 2 months on this episode. Go figure. Spent 2 months on this episode, and it's about the Constitution. It's about the Sandbox Foundation's Constitution. It's about what is it about? It's about the Foundation's company, the Cayman Islands law. What does it actually say? And how do we create a Foundation's company? What does that mean to us as SandFam and the DAO? How does the DAO actually run? And what are all the regulations that we have to abide by? So when people say that we're in, when Kunta said during his episode 2, 3, and 4 with Cyril that we're in a gray area of regulatory landscape, this is what we're referring to, is the laws that are in place and the regulations that affect the Sandbox DAO. I went and read all those laws, and I put together an episode to explain them as best I can, to kind of show you what is the relevance and what is the importance of these terms that we're reading when we say articles of association, memo association, a foundation. What does it mean to say limited by guarantee? What is a subscriber? What is an exempted company? What do the registrar have to do with anything? All the acts and regulations that go with that, what fees we're paying, all of that is spelled out in the Cayman Islands law. And so I read it all. I prepared an episode. I'm done with it. I should be giving it next week. I might do a couple more episodes after that, but I'm largely going to stop doing those deep, long episodes and just stick to maybe 10-minute weekly updates, and that's it. I might do some interviews here and there, but it's largely just going to change. So, yeah. If you are a SandFam, here's where we gather. Discord. That's the hashtag DAO discussion channel. There's a Sandbox DAO forums, which is forum.sandboxdao.com. They're on on Twitter, there's SandFam, hashtag Sandbox DAO, hashtag the Sandbox Game. And on YouTube, there's a Sandbox DAO Lanzer YT, which is SandDAO. There's than what you're listening to. SandFam Cafe. On Mondays is Mochaverse Hall and Twitter Space. On Saturdays is Bulls on the Block. Monday through Friday is Coffee with Captain. And on Tuesdays is Whale Members. Natively Digital is what they call it. I went back and forth whether or not I should delete them off this space because, whatever. But they're still a good entity. It's just I'm disappointed with the way they voted. So I'm gonna go check see if anyone is currently on to raid. If not, we are going to conclude. Look at the chat. What do we got in the chat? Denkoi said, funny to think that the whole issue revolves around the 15,000. I kept wondering if it presented as 7.5 would have been approved. Yeah. Oh, we did talk about that. Yeah, I think it would have been. And Roxy Miguel in chat says, just 2 cents here, but I'd like to see you expand more into the gaming ecosystem and not just the DAO. I'd love to see you cover those places. I'm sure you do amazing, even though SandDAO is slowing down a bit now. Hey, that's this right here. That's one of the episodes I wanted to cover. Oops, that needs to be updated, doesn't it? Give me just a second. I updated this for what I wanted to do in January. This was before the SIP did not pass. So let's update this slide real fast, and then you will see what I mean. Oh, need to reload it. Okay, there we go. So I'm going to do what is a foundation company. I'm going to do an episode on reading through the Constitution, articles, and memos. Because once you read through the Cayman Islands law, all of these other things make sense. All the terms become very known. It's very, very straightforward. Then I was going to invite a lawyer from the Cayman Islands to do episode on the case law and legal opinion on the questions that still remained. Like what is the allure of a foundation company? Some stuff that wasn't obvious when I read the law. I was going to invite a lawyer on and use, part of that money from the SIP. But since I'm not funded, I'm not going to do that anymore. I'm just going to read the questions and then conclude the episode. And I still want to interview Mo, who's the 12th delegate. I want to do a follow-up of Magic Palette. I did want to do a follow-up of Sandbox Academy. However, they're experiencing some difficulties right now. I'm not sure that's going to happen. And then I wanted to do the ecosystem. So I want to do an episode of the ecosystem and the DAO, kind of the way the DAO is propped up and structured. I want to do how the creators ecosystem worked. I want to do how the marketplace worked with the catalysts and the minting and all of that and the markets. Then I want to do one on the gamers, like how gaming in the Sandbox ecosystem worked. And then here's the business of the Sandbox publishing. Then I want to do some cross-cultural panels and some cultural panels. So, Korean, Chinese, Mandarin, that sort of thing. But I don't think I'm going to get to these last two anymore. I don't think I'm going to do the creators of the market one anymore. I'm going to do the DAO one because it's pretty simple at this point to do. And because Roxy, you asked for me to do one on the gamers, I think I might do that one. But we'll see. It depends on how much. Some of these take a long time to research and to get done. And if it takes too much time and effort, then I'm not going to be able to do it. And yeah, so I'm gonna do these three because they're pretty much already done. And then if I can get Mo, I will interview him. If Pepe is able to provide an update, we'll do a quick one there. I will do the DAO. I might do the gamers. And I want to do the business of Sandbox Experience Publishing, but it takes a lot of math and preparation to do that, so I might not get to it anymore. Most people who know understand anyways. And that's it. I will be SandDAO Weekly after that, 10-minute episodes, and that's all I'll be able to do. Dan Coy said in the chat, innovate and come back stronger than ever. We're excited for your renewal. Well, thank you, Dan Coy. I appreciate that. We'll see. See. It's not a no. It's just I can't keep going the way I've been going. And if I don't have the funding to keep going, I have to do something different. And yeah. Not sad. It's just dealing with how things go. And that's all we have today. We talked about SIP-18, the downfall of the SandDAO podcast SIP, a $15,000 SIP that was supposed to fund or was requesting to fund 15 more episodes off of our now 55 episodes from the SandDAO podcast. Unfortunately, it was not funded, and we went over all the reasons why. So, thank you all for your time. Appreciate Dan Coy and Roxy Miguel in chat. Thank you so much. I'm going to. Is there anyone on I can? Raid? Yeah, there's someone who's not Sandbox related, but someone that is a friend that a Twitch friend. Damien's Gaming. So we're gonna raid Damien's Gaming, and yeah, it's not sad, but ultimately, life's gonna be okay. We're gonna be all right. Thank you all. Bye, SandFam.